This is an age of disruption, of profound revolutionary change.
What we're really asking ministers is to empower the ambassadors.
The only thing that you really push forth is the truth.
You don't see many women represented when it comes to the decisions as to how to handle the pandemic.
Good afternoon, my name is Mathieu Paulet and I'm a technology reporter at Politico, and I'm coming to you from our very own office in Brussels. You are watching Politico Live, the live extensions of Politico's unbiased journalism. In the ever-evolving landscape of digital innovation, cloud computing stands as a key driver for progress, enabling businesses to harness the power of data, scalability and efficiency. However, the European cloud market finds itself as a crossroad here. Despite being hailed as a cornerstone for the bloc's digital transformation, it is grappling with a sluggish business uptake, a market dominated by a few players and marred by concerns of customers lock-in. As we gather here today, the EU faces the pressing challenge of fostering a competitive and open cloud market. Today's discussion will try to explore the barriers inhibiting the widespread adoption of cloud technology. The statistics paint a sobering picture. The EU is not on track to see 3/4 of its businesses moving to the cloud. We will delve into the current competition landscape among cloud providers in Europe, examining the dynamics that contribute to the dominance of a select few and potentially hinder the growth of others. Several competition authorities have recognized the need for scrutiny while policymakers are trying to address bottlenecks through regulations. But how do those interventions impact the competitive dynamics within the cloud sector, and can they truly pave the way for a more open and thriving market? We'll discuss this and more with our panelists, but first we have some housekeeping remarks. I would like to thank our partner Google for making this event possible, and thank our fantastic Politico Live team who have made it all come together. And we also want to make this event as interactive as possible, so you can participate by tweeting at @LivePolitico and ask questions through Slido using the hashtag #OpeningTheCloud. But if you wish to do so, please state your name and organization for transparency. You can also share your thoughts and answer the following word cloud on Slido presented by our partner Google, and answer the question: what are the current competition problems among cloud providers in Europe? We'll look at your input throughout the conversation. But we will now hear some opening remarks from our partner. Lee Junius, if you'd like to join me on stage. You're the Senior Director of Google Cloud.
Thank you, Mathieu. It's such a pleasure to see you and a lot of other colleagues in the audience today, and hello also to the audience virtually online. So thanks Politico and the crew for hosting us for an important event, I believe, today. It's good to be here because it's the right moment to have a discussion around competition in the cloud computing markets. Cloud computing has in fact revolutionized digital economy in the past decade. It has empowered both government but also business customers of all sizes, small and big, to reduce costs, to enhance security, cybersecurity very relevant, simplify interoperability, and deliver services for the customers at an unprecedented reach. So innovative companies, I think, for instance, about Spotify, Revolut, have harnessed the elasticity and the flexibility of cloud providers like Google Cloud to deliver exceptional user experiences, increase their computing efficiency, and speed up deployments. And these organizations have been able to do so, have been able to scale their technology as they were growing. And they were freed from any constraints, for instance, from legacy software or in infrastructure solutions. Equally, I think in a year that has been very much dominated by one team, I ask you which one? Anyone that knows which is the team that is the most topical at the moment? AI, yeah, there we go. So indeed, in a year that has been dominated by generative AI, it's very crucial to recognize that most of the AI applications are cloud-based. So we believe this is something positive because cloud has the ability to democratize access to AI. So not just for big companies, but also for startups. And so everybody can have the same cutting edge AI tools. So both small and large companies. This was truly not imaginable in previous eras, the eras of proprietary software and on-premise service. So we really went a long way since then. So therefore, with AI and cloud, it's not a surprise that the cloud market is growing, is rapidly expanding. The potential is enormous. The potential of the market is vast, as we know. We are expecting European cloud spending to increase from 63 billion today to 560 billion at the end of this decade. So as public sector and commercial customers migrate their workloads to the cloud, this market will really truly play an increasingly vital role in Europeans' digital economy. So in light of increasing stakes, fostering a competitive cloud market is an absolute must, it's an imperative. And we at Google Cloud, we firmly believe that providers should compete on a level playing field. And customers should have the freedom to choose the cloud provider that best suits their needs, not because they have been in a way railroaded into certain choices because of their existing software licensing portfolio, but making sure that there is no lock-in and genuine choice. Unfortunately, there is evidence that restrictive licensing practices and artificial barriers to interoperability imposed by a number of legacy providers are hindering competition and stifling innovation. In some way, we could think that the anti-competitive playbook of the 90s is being reimagined in the world of cloud. A landmark study by Professor Jenny, commissioned by CISPE, and I see that our colleagues from CISPE are here today, was really interesting because it revealed how restrictive licensing terms can distort the competition. And Professor Jenny's findings demonstrate how companies with a dominant position in one area of software can steer the business towards their own cloud services. And we believe that if this is left unchecked, these practices will harm competition and jeopardizing the viability of European cloud providers and the business that rely on them. I want to quote another story, which is the Asterisk story, a French study story, where we got an interesting number that said that 61% of large French firms face restriction on their cloud provider's choice. And this would result in major companies' cost of nearly 150 million a year. We see also evidence of a vendor lock-in where vendors inflate prices due to customer switching barriers. The 2021 Jenny study saw examples of renewal prices increasing up to 40%, suggesting providers had a high level of confidence that their customers would not switch. These anti-competitive practices not only hinder, we believe, competition, but also pose cybersecurity risks. Moreover, they stifle innovation by fostering a monoculture in cloud. We believe that there is another way. Encouragingly, regulators in Germany, at EU level, in France, are taking steps to investigate anti-competitive practices in the cloud story. Spain has just launched a study, an inquiry into the cloud industry, concerned about market concentration. And we also welcome in the UK the developments. The UK Competition and Markets Authority decided to examine software licensing specifically as part of the cloud investigation. We will, as Google, of course, participate in regulatory investigations to ensure that the cloud market operates fairly for all customers in Europe. So as Google, we remain committed to the original promise of cloud, to be open, to have an elastic cloud free from any lock-in. As most of you know, we pioneered multi-cloud architecture. We very much support the open source technology. We have an open source philosophy, and we have a very strong commitment to portability. We also endorse the first software principles that were adopted by CISPE and SIGREF, and actively collaborate to advocate for those principles. In this respect, when it comes to an open and fair cloud market, we believe that our words are matched by our actions. So it should be clear that we at Google believe that protecting and promoting competition in the cloud is absolutely essential. The cloud holds an immense potential for continued innovation and growth, and we must ensure that it remains open and accessible to all. We will do all what we can to support that outcome. I stop here. I have talked enough. I'm very much looking forward to the panel and the discussion afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ali. A lot to unpack here. But to do that, I would like to invite my dear guests on stage so we can, discuss this. Please. So I'm thrilled to host today's conversation, which is not a manual, but a funnel. And I actually looked that up, and that term exists, right? But people, obviously don't use that enough. But thank you very much for accepting our invitations. Renate Nicolai, you're the Deputy Director at DG Connect. Louisa Fusa, you're the Chief Economist at Ofcom, the communication regulator in the UK. Daniel Jacobs, you're the CEO of Beltugs, which is the Belgium Association of Chief Information Officers. And then we've got Niamh Christina Gleeson. You are Managing Director at ICT Legal Consulting France. Thank you so much for joining us today for this conversation. I'd like to start with you, Renate. So the Commission published in September its first report on the state of the digital decade, which assesses how well member states were doing when it comes to the target by the end of the decade. Cloud uptake is one of these targets. But according to the current trajectory, the EU will miss the target with only 65% of companies using cloud by 2030. Is it a disappointing figure, a surprising figure?
Not so much, because this Digital Decade Policy Program report, the first one, showed on all the four kind of key areas where we set ourselves together with the Parliament and the Member States targets for 2030. So public administration, digitalization of business, skills, connectivity, that if we simply continue like that, we will never met the target. So it showed that we are on a road. The uptake is in all these areas, including on cloud, better compared to where we were before we started that kind of exercise, but we have to change gear. And I think that was the clear result. Also on the use of cloud, or it's the broader context of business digitalization, and in particular for SMEs, there are still barriers to really kind of go into the cloud, and that's why we had to come with policy responses on that. Okay, and we will get to that in a moment, but maybe Daniel first. What's holding back companies, businesses, when they want to move to the cloud in the first place?
Well, there are a lot of issues on our side. So what I will tell you is I'm from the Association of CIOs and Digital Technology Leaders in Belgium. So the people I talk to every day is just businesses using cloud or other technology. So that's my background. We run a kind of task forces on vendor management and for specific suppliers. And it's really incredible if we have these discussions, how difficult it is for people to work in the cloud. We are absolutely pro-cloud, so that needs to be clear. We absolutely see it's a great technology. So we want to benefit from the cloud as much as possible. But the issue is that once that you have chosen your cloud solution, you are bound for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And the vendor locking is really something we see in practice. And then you have a long-term commitment to this cloud provider. Exiting is very difficult. Now there are new concerns about what about our data in the cloud, because are the providers training their AI systems on our data? What about the copyright and so on? And what we see, and that is really frightening me a little bit, every 2 years we do a kind of a market survey, and for the first time we saw a decline of cloud-first approach. The previous years when we did the market studies, okay, cloud first, that's the way to go. And now for the first time, people say, we will see case by case, because we are having some concerns about our data, about security, and multi-cloud is a very difficult one as well.
Niamh, I guess that's something you discuss, maybe not on a daily basis, but a lot with your clients.
Yeah. It's like, what remedies, if I do find myself in difficulty, what legal redress do we have? And
it's something businesses are aware of, even taking that jump, even before taking that jump.
That this is a risk assessment, and if they do get into difficulty, what are their options under, and if they are having problems with their provider, what sort of regulatory or competition law solutions are available. And we've had a flood of certain competition authorities publishing reports now, but prior to that, competition enforcement under traditional competition law was a blank page. So we don't have a range of decisions that penalised any of this, but a lot of noise about how businesses were unhappy with how the cloud providers were treating them, but nothing in itself, and that's not a particular criticism of the competition authorities. It reflects digital enforcement against digital providers. And the nascent state of the cloud. So in the last 10 years, though, I think that was the excuse all the time. Well, it's a nascent market, it's being adopted. And yes, there was, and when you talk to businesses in the past, there were other concerns that have kind of been addressed by the data protection regulation, by the security in place, then the NIST. So there's everything else, the other regulations in place. It's the market access and market opening. So either through competition law, and traditional competition law doesn't seem to really address, or the DMA, the Data Act, the other instruments that we're hoping to come there. But just until now, talking to any client, you go, well, you could bring a competition case, but if it's against a dominant, you'd have to prove dominance. That's a binary test normally under Article 102. Either a provider is dominant or not, and they have to have over 40% market share. And only depending on how you're defining that market, so there is just one normally. And then after that, is the conduct abusive or not? And even then, what remedies are available? And competition law hasn't been great about remedies like and that's all ex post. So you have to stay in business till you get to that point. And you're still going to be dealing with probably with the same providers. I mean, then what choice do you have? So I think traditional competition law has been ineffective up to now, although competition authorities, national competition authorities, are certainly signalling they're open for business, but they're also saying, well, look at the Data Act. This is what we
Hold that thought. We will move on to that in a minute. I just wanted to ask Louisa about, obviously, the Ofcom report that was published early October, I believe. I think what I found also very interesting is that one of the findings, there are many findings, but one of them is also, it's about saying, well, competition, as we speak today in the current landscapes, it plays out when actually companies move to the cloud for the first time, right?
That's right. So what we found was that there's quite a lot of competition to get consumers onto the cloud. But once they're there, there is a real risk that they get locked in. So all we were hearing so far about customers experiencing that there are a number of barriers to kind of move on. And we identified a number of features in particular. So starting from egress fees.
I promise I was going to ask you about this. I just wanted to know what drove you in the first place to look into the market.
And that's a very good point, because it links back to what Niamh was saying, which is something that we've been experiencing across a number of digital markets. The fact that these markets are moving quite rapidly, and they're not very well suited for the kind of competition art interventions that, in the past we've relied upon to ensure the markets work well. So in the UK, we have this market regime that enables us to go and look into a market. Now, Ofcom, in addition to being the communications and media regulator, is also the competition authority for these markets. So it means that if we have a suspicion that a market is not working as well as it might, we can open a market study. So it's a very quick study. It's only 1 year, as you said. We published our final report in October.
Now to be picked up by
We
the
launched
CMA.
it the previous year. So in 1 year, we had to review the state of competition and get to the bottom of whether there were any problems in our view or potential problems, what those were, whether there would be potential solutions, in which case we then refer it to the Competition and Markets Authority for an in-depth market investigation. So that's what's happening now. For the next 2 years, the CMA will look in depth at the theories of harm that we have posed, as well as Lee mentioned, additional concerns around software licensing.
And we will get to that, but there seems already there is like this common understanding that the market is not working as effectively as it should, and yet, Renate, there were no cloud providers designated under the Digital Markets Act, much to the surprise, disappointment sometimes of some part of the industry. Can you walk us through?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, that was my next question. You're already moving there. Okay.
We have not closed the door at all that under the DMA we might in the future have to look into that. Look, I mean, we are just kind of growing into our role as digital sheriffs under the DSA and the DMA. We're faced with immediately litigation from kind of both the very large online platforms designated under the DSA and also the gatekeepers designated under the DMA. When you start your regulatory kind of work on compliance and enforcement, you choose and you kind of go for where you have strong kind of conviction. I think that we have designated the 6 gatekeepers with a lot of their services already. I think is an important first step, but this is a dynamic process. As we will kind of be having second batches of
you haven't ruled out
not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
This has been clearly communicated. Nothing is ruled out. But what we wanted to do this term, at the moment in this year, was really to untap the potential of the data economy in the EU. And this is the key kind of promise of the Data Act, and it has a very important chapter on cloud.
But what could trigger you then to look into cloud providers being designated under the DMA?
Well, I think we all learn with the market developments. We have, I think, a very vibrant, as we heard, a very vibrant kind of technological development. We hope to have an AI Act under the roof very soon. We have, a potential of, data and cloud and AI that is a perfect storm for kind of, the next kind of technological revolution here. If you kind of take that into account, that kind of might create kind of changes in the businesses that could go for more competition if the offers that we are providing in the Data Act are used, if the technological industrial support that we are creating around it with the Cloud Alliance, but also with the IPCI that we just launched on cloud, if that all materializes, then it will maybe come quite naturally. Or if not, if the kind of the market consolidation does not happen and the kind of, the abusive kind of, behavior continues, then indeed we have DMA, we have potentially the competition law, and of course we will not hesitate to use all our tools.
Daniel, is it a missed opportunity for now? No cloud providers in the DMA?
Well, we were very, very, very disappointed, very surprised as well. We had a discussion also with DG Competition about it, like, wow, what is happening here? We got the same reaction, like, okay, this is not a final step. We will look, okay, maybe the quantitative criteria are not met, but there are some other possibilities, and we absolutely will give our input based on our experiences to the Commission further, because this is really important. We think 3 parts are necessary. So you have the DMA and hopefully some, well, we do not understand that there are really large cloud players. I think that's no discussion. Then there's a Data Act, and the Data Act solves some of our issues, like on portability and on exit. It will be better, but we do work together a lot with the CIO associations from France, Germany, the Netherlands, and Belgium, and so. When we saw all these issues in cloud, we said, okay, we need to document this, and this is what we've done together with the FAIR principles, not the one from CISPE. They are a little bit difficult because it's about infrastructure. This is going further, and so to solve this, you have DMA, you have Data Act, which solves already 3 of our principles. And for the others, let me give you an example, because otherwise people maybe think always about the hyperscalers, but if you are a company, let's say in pharmacy, and you want to test medicines, you can have a cloud provider that is really offering services to your sector, and that is also abusing the situation that you are locked in, to also come with what we call unfair practices. So we think DMA is something, Data Act for portability and switching, but fair principles, just fair business practices, that is also a very important part, just like in other markets where fair competition is needed. And of course, it's difficult for competition authorities because it's new, it's evolving very fast. But what we see happening on the market is just not always serious.
It feels like you all want to talk about the Data Act, so I will give in. But first, I'll just give it some momentum and I'll turn to Luisa actually, because egress fees is one of these lock-in features that you identified, right? So can you walk us through the finding on this of the Ofcom report on egress fees?
So what we found...
And maybe remind us what this is, because I'm sure we have like a very tech-savvy crowd here, but...
No, basically, it's relatively simple. When businesses that use cloud need to move data across different functionalities, they obviously face a cost. But when they then want to move to a different cloud, they face this costs called egress fees. We refer to those as egress fees. And as you can imagine, when a business client would like to use different cloud providers. So for us, multi-cloud is absolutely fundamental because different cloud providers offer different functionalities, different type of products that can support that. So if a business client needs to pay every time they need to port the data to one of the other providers by paying these egress fees, then it's obvious they will not do that. So these egress fees can be a real barrier to multi-cloud, ultimately to switching. So for us, this is a real concern. And that is where, obviously there is, now the CMA will look into how much a barrier are they and what can be done. So what can you do to intervene in that space? Does it require regulation of prices at cost? Does it require a stronger intervention of banning egress fees altogether? And these are things that obviously the Data Act considers. We in the UK are obviously behind. The Data Act doesn't apply to us, but we will look with a lot of interest.
Replicated in the
absolutely.
UK at some point?
Well,
Okay.
we'll see what happens. I mean, there is an interest in having a regulation that makes sense applied more broadly. So if we can learn anything from the experience of the European Commission, that's more than welcome.
So just to remind us that the Data Act will phase out actually those switching charges and aim to facilitate the overall process. Niamh, is it the right way forward? Does it go as far as you would like it to go?
I think it offers a lot of opportunities, especially it's not about asymmetric regulation. So it's not just saying, well, these are the big providers and only these the obligations apply to them. And as Danielle said, there could be a very small provider, but that once you're locked into them, there could be a... So this kind of ensures you can switch away. You can try different clouds. You can switch back if you prefer. So it really opens this up. And I think banning the egress fees is one step, but also facilitating switching is the other. And that really, rather than going down the route of complaining and trying to identify abusive dominance or abusive practices in themselves, and spending that time, having that is, not even having to do that, having a regulatory obligation, that really opens up a possibility, I think, legally for anyone who wants to bring a complaint.
Renate, how big of a game changer will the Data Act be?
I think the Data Act is really a big game changer for Europe. I have a privacy background. I kind of negotiated the GDPR, and for many years we were in Europe very much focusing on data minimization, protection of the privacy, and that's right. But I think with the data strategy and with the Data Governance Act and the Data Act, what we are doing here is actually to kind of promote the data use. Of course, building on our privacy legislation, but really for the kind of the next use of data in this kind of, development on more connected products and services to really untap the potential of the 80% of data that we are not using at the moment in the EU. And that was the kind of, underlying kind of, context under which we kind of started the negotiation on the Data Act. And that goes for all sectors. And there I'm quite happy that we have a cloud specific kind of chapter in the Data Act, because also there, if we want kind of all the businesses to go into the cloud, we have to make it easier for everybody. And that's the idea. We have to break the silos in all these different sectors. It goes for all the industrial sectors, because then we can open up the space for the innovation. But we have to fill it with life, because it's a fundamental legislation, the Data Act. But what I can share with you, I was just in Luxembourg yesterday, where my team that has negotiated the Data Act with me is residing, and we are really actively engaged in outreach with sectors who might not even think that they could have potential business cases under the Data Act to open that potential. For me, it is a big game changer, but we have to fill it with life.
Mm-hmm. And I'm picking up what you just said. So we need to incentivize companies also going to the cloud, but also the multi-cloud approach, right? Is it the next step also?
I wouldn't close the door to that either, because I think, the more we want to see developments, in that market, away from the, a few actors, to more kind of, possibilities. Also, when we are going to the next level of connectivity, where everything is moving closer to the edge, then of course you might have very, very different solutions. I mean, another area of my work is the kind of the future connectivity. If you see that also in the telco sector, we are moving more from kind of, telcos meeting the cloud, then also there you have totally new business opportunities. So I think multi-cloud is definitely, a very important part of the story.
Back to the Data Act, or kind of related, Niamh, I know the French are also trying to address the issue of switching charges, of interoperability also overall within a much bigger tech bill in France, which is now in the hand of lawmakers and in the final phase. Anything we can learn from them? And I'm asking you because I know you've been following this not out of pure chauvinism, right? Just for the record.
Oh, yes. I think they were very conscious of waiting for the Data Act and the opinion from the French Competition Authority on the bill was about not cutting across the Data Act and waiting for that to be finalised. So I think what we can learn from that is that it was in tandem with European legislation, trying not to go off on its own, but very conscious of the same issues. And I think at the moment, certainly with the publication of both the opinion of the French Competition Authority and its finding on cloud, we'll see the end game on the legislation. I don't know what that will be, but it will certainly be a complement to enforcement of the Data Act.
Mm-hmm. So we've covered egress fees. There are other lock-in features, obviously, but I'd like to have a look at the word cloud. So you remember the question: what are the current competition problems among cloud providers in Europe? You can see. I hope you can see it. Renate is just behind you.
Yep.
So let's just look into this. So there is switching, like big innovation. I would assume lack thereof, right? Data portability, egress fees one, vendor lock-in, anti-competitive practices. So that's also some of these issues. I see interoperability, switching is also a big part of the Ofcom report, right?
Interoperability is fundamental in our view. Now, obviously, we will need to think of different levels of interoperability, and that will be the big question for the CMA, because one of the problems that we found was that there were some kind of technical features of the different cloud operators that
What
may
does it mean, interoperability
well,
between
that's the
two
thing, right? That
competitive companies?
you are able to take your data, your products, and use them on a different cloud, and or you can at the same time using different clouds with the same data. So, you know, a bit like in the telecoms nowadays, you can use, telephone companies, which are different, but you call each other. Email is perfectly interoperable. So that is the ideal world. Obviously, in cloud, that's a lot more complex, and we need to understand what that means in practice. It may go all the way to the extreme of connecting data centers, but it doesn't need to go to all the way the extreme. You can start by simplifying some technical solution, because sometimes we can find that there are artificial technological incompatibilities that can emerge that make it difficult then for businesses to move. And it doesn't need to be, a very big technical barriers, but we found that sometimes all those difficult technical features make it much harder. And obviously, if you think you're a business and you have your, IT head deciding, should I use the cloud of the operator with whom I've got all the other services, or shall I switch? They're risk averse, right? Why would they risk? What's the advantage? And that is something which is fundamental, because then it means that you get this lock-in because of these technology frictions and ultimately, the lack of interoperability.
Danielle, is it in line with what you've been experiencing?
Yeah, sure.
What you see?
But it's not only the technical obstacles to change; it's also commercial obstacles. If services are bundled, you need to be very brave to say no. We don't want this discount of pricing if we take these services maybe on another cloud infrastructure. So that is certainly also an issue. And on switching and exit, we see that if we talk to our members, not so many contracts already have exit clauses or switching clauses. So that is something we need to educate the market to say, when you start, before you start, already take the exits into account. And of course, we hope that with the Data Act, the egress fees and the switching becomes more easy. Maybe a little negative note is multi-cloud is not easy. Switching from one cloud to another in infrastructure, at infrastructure level, that should absolutely be possible. So there we absolutely need to go, and with Data Act, that will be much better. If you have software as a service, it's much more difficult. And people, if you want to have multi-cloud, in our members, okay, we are Belgium, we have not that many very large companies, but only 8% is using really multi-cloud, because they say you need to have the knowledge of 2 clouds, you need to have more security aspects. It's just complicated, and people don't have a lot of people to find to do all the IT and the digital stuff. So they prefer then to invest in innovation instead of going to multi-cloud at this moment.
So Renate, you see there are still a lot of issues to address. So I'd like to go back to the title of our event, actually, which is either. It doesn't have to be either. I think that's what you were going to say. I presume. But does it have to be addressed through regulations or competition or both or none?
Well, it is always both, I think, and it's even also technological support and industrial support, because I think, in this dynamic field where we are, I think you need regulation. I think one aspect that hasn't been mentioned enough in this debate yet is the security aspect. I think, in order to create the trust, for instance, of the small and medium-sized enterprises not going to cloud solutions, they need to have the trust, and here security requirements and here certification potentially, comes into play, because that will make it easier for you to think, oh, there will not be an unlawful access by any governments or whatever, any security issues that might arise. We should never forget the geopolitical context we are in. So I think that's an aspect that.
But some see that at a bottleneck.
Yeah. I mean, you have to do it right, but I think nevertheless, I think you cannot in a kind of sustainable cloud market in the EU that we want, where we have multiple players kind of flourishing in it, where we have multiple use by business for these cloud opportunities, because that's so important for our next technological step. I think you need to address the security aspects, and they have to be built in. I think that's a lesson that we learned, that in this technological development, you have to build in privacy by design and security by design. But of course, there is a lot of kind of, education to be done. I think some of it will come with the implementation of the Data Act, the repository, the standard clauses, all that will help people to kind of feel more assured. But I think there is still also just to spread the news of good projects that are taking off, like on the basis of the IPCI that we just launched, the industrial technological support that we can give in an intelligent public-private partnership, which is the idea of the strategic project. I think that's equally important as regulation to kind of really go for that next technological move.
Niamh, I've got a question which I chose to ask you from the audience. What are to what extent does the GDPR Data Protection Act, which I guess is the Data Act maybe, create obstacles or opportunities to cloud adoption?
Okay, the Data Act rather than GDPR.
Yeah, I guess, because I've got this GDPR/Data Protection Act, which I'm not sure what it refers to. So let's stick to GDPR.
Yeah. Okay.
Would you say it create obstacles to cloud uptake adoption?
I think the sort of framework that's been put in place over the last 10 years, when I started research on cloud computing in 2013, and I'm a regulatory competition lawyer who's specialized in telecom. So I was like, great, what are your barriers to entry? And no one cared. They cared about security in cloud. They wanted to convince their customers it was safe to use a cloud, to put their stuff in cloud. And that was the conversation I was having when I was doing that research. And we were aware that there was going to be lock-in, or there could be lock-in, or the interoperability. That was the last thing on the list at the time. So I think the adoption of the GDPR, for example, that sorted out, in fact, what would happen to my data and how I should use it. So if the question was about GDPR, that actually helped set a wider regulatory framework. And I think the security certification that we'd hope at European level will be another kind of layer on it's safe to put your stuff in cloud, and it's a very clear framework. And I think finally, yes, the adoption of the Data Act is sort of the icing on the cake, as in now we've gotten through all the other kind of wider regulatory horizon of what could happen in cloud. You're safe to put it up. You know what your data is being used for. There's a regime for all of that, and there's the Data Act about using and switching.
So am I to understand that we've got everything we need now? We just need to make good use of it.
It needs to happen in practice.
Okay. Is that what you think also?
It's very difficult to let it happen in practice, because GDPR is almost 6 years old, and we've been in our group a group of privacy specialists, and it's always again every meeting like, how do you deal with this? How do you deal with that? So they're still learning, and there are hundreds of guidelines of the different national data protection authorities, and then at the European level. And what we need, and also for the Data Act, is standard contractual clauses, guidance, like that. Not every company needs to invent how long should I keep the data of people that come for a job. Is it 2 years, 1 year? That not every company in Europe needs to say, okay, how long shall I keep it? It should be clear just from the start. And now with AI, what we see now is that it's very difficult for companies. Like, we need to be compliant, but the providers now offering, and it's going in all directions, offering AI services, they are certainly not always compliant with GDPR, which means that if you use it, you're not compliant either. So it's a moving target, and that is make it very, very difficult for businesses.
GDPR was always supposed to be technologically neutral and innovation friendly. Yeah. That was a promise that we gave us. We kind of invented the GDPR reform 10 years ago. We kind of played with pseudonymization, anonymization at a time where this was still not where we are today. So we have a governance structure on GDPR implementation that is very different from the governance structures that we are building at the moment. If you look at DSA, DMA, or if you look at the board structures that we create with the Data Act or the Data Governance Act. So probably there's a debate to be had whether we have to look into that and to see whether the promise of the future-proof and technologically neutral and innovation-friendly kind of aspect of the GDPR that was there can still be lived today. Just putting that as an issue.
I've got another question asking about might be for you, Renate. Are all the hyperscalers offer a competitive, anti-competitive bundling, tying of offerings which small cloud providers can't match with? Will any EU regulation action will change this? Could change this?
Sorry, say that again.
I think it's right behind you, actually, like the top one. Like.
Offer anti-competitive.
Yes, I mean, I think everything we do right now, to kind of, open the space for, more users to kind of, ask for switching, will kind of, open the silos, will create more potential kind of, opportunities for new players. I think the potential threat of the DMA looking at anti-competitive burden is there. The competition law is there. So I think what we are seeing.
So there is no need for additional regulation.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I really think we have shown in this mandate in particular that we have, really done a huge jump ahead in digital rulebook making. And I think the challenge for us now is to show that Europe is not only good at adopting laws, but actually at putting them in practice and enforcing them in a way that they have an impact. And that's what we should be focusing on now.
Mm-hmm. And can I add that's very much the reason why we are investigating this market, right? So we want to ensure that there is entry, that there is, prosperity for new entrants alongside the hyperscalers. So if you start addressing those barriers, that's the ultimate goal. So absolutely, that's all directed there. I mean, in our case in the UK, the CMA can even intervene with structural remedies. That means even potentially breaking, some of the vertical chains. Obviously, that's an extreme remedy, very rarely used. But, that is the ultimate goal. So we will test the remedies to make sure that that goal will be achieved.
Is that something that you would do on your own, or maybe try to do that hand in hand with the European regulator?
Well,
down that road?
We have different regulatory routes at the moment, but I'm hoping that we will learn from each other. Obviously, we're lagging behind on the Digital Markets Competition and Consumer Act, but we are looking at the DMA, and I think there will be a lot of cross-fertilization, because ultimately we want to minimize the regulatory burden for businesses to ensure that we achieve these goals in the most efficient way.
My next question might sound a bit obvious from a competition perspective, but bear with me. Do we need more players on the market? And especially, and this is where the trick is, do you also need to make room for bigger European alternatives? And I think this is what you said earlier, right, with the announcement earlier this week about this important project of common European interest announcement. I don't know who came with the acronym, but that's always very difficult. IPCI, fair enough. So yeah, could it shape the market any differently if we had more players, but European?
I think we've tried that for a while. I mean, we have the Cloud Alliance, we really kind of, tried in critical strategic sectors, that's what we are doing. That's what kind of, European industrial policy support and technological support is about. And I think, we're doing that in quantum, we're doing that in kind of, semiconductors, and we are doing it in cloud. And I think the IPCI will be an important tool to kind of showcase that if you put private money and public money together, you're engaging, with different players from different in a pan-European way from the beginning, into interesting solutions. These projects can kind of scale up and can eventually also create, the emergence of new players. I think that's always, from a digital sovereignty point of view, a very interesting argument. But on the other hand, this is an open market, and it should remain an open market. So that's also not about, kind of chasing people out. It's more about having a fair and open environment for the digital kind of transition that we want to see.
Danielle, is there a strong appetite for more European players in the offer?
Well, there is certainly a strong appetite to have more choice and more possibilities to, once you use a certain software, that you feel less locked in and that you have choices. And something what was in the questions, like What we see happening on the market is if there's a small player having something very interesting, it is being bought by one of the largest. And I'm not speaking about the hyperscalers even, just speak about other companies. But what is very important, I think, is I'm doing this job for quite some years, and I always spoke to the people responsible for IT, and then it became digital, okay? But now it's at board level. So the questions we get now is more and more that people say, coming from boards to us, being just the CIOs, like, wow, we are really, for the processing and the functioning of our company, depending on one player, which is quite a risk to take. So it's really, it's the board who needs to take the strategy and the risk appetite. And so that is new to me. That's only the last 2-3 years that I hear this feedback from larger companies saying, okay, it's at board level now. They need to see, do we want to depend and put all our eggs in one basket? It's...
We saw, I guess, from a competition regulator perspective, the more the merrier.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, obviously...
So do you think actually having more European alternatives could shape the market any differently?
It's an industry which has huge economies of scale. So, you know, I'd be surprised if we saw a large number. But more than the existing one, yes, absolutely.
Okay, fair enough. We'll have to wrap up. I'd like to ask you a last question, Renate, because... And I think you said that before, considering how important cloud will be, so you said for telecoms, right, but also for AI, right? And yes. Of all days, we can talk about AIs today. How urgent is it to address the issue we've been discussing today?
I think it's, as I said, it's part of this kind of, data, cloud, AI kind of, connection. And I think that's, if we want to kind of, untap the next level of technological revolution that we are seeking, the disruptive kind of, impact it has on all business, on all of us, on society, then we need to get that right. We need to untap the potential for the data, we need to open up the space for cloud services, and we need to kind of, embrace AI innovation. And I think that's why I think it is perfect to put it all together. That's why I'm looking forward to the finalization of the AI Act trilogue. I'm proud that we have the IPCI and that we have the Data Act, and I'm proud that we have the digital rule book. We just have to make it work. It's a huge responsibility on us to not, to really kind of help the business to kind of embrace it, to have possibly in the next year's, next June, in the Digital Decade Policy Report, a better story to tell and a better uptake.
Thank you, and with that, I'd like to thank all our panelists for joining the conversation today. Also, thank you to the audience for joining us in person and tuning in online, to our speakers for joining us, of course, on stage, for Google for making this event possible. We'd love to hear your feedback, so feel free to send us an email about the event at live@politico.eu. And finally, you can check our Politico event website for the latest lineup of all our events, including our upcoming Tech and AI Summit, which takes place on April 18th. And we hope to see you there. Thank you very much, and until next time, thank you very much.
This is an age of disruption, of profound revolutionary change.
What we're really asking ministers is to empower the ambassadors.
The only thing that you really push forth is the truth.
You don't see many women represented when it comes to the decisions as to how to handle the pandemic.